What's going on, folks? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by DJ Khaled Listennn, the album. Now, basically, DJ Khaled was about the first DJ kind of type musician to amalgamate a whole bunch of rapper musicians on songs the way that this format kind of would go on to happen. Later musicians like DJ Drama and other DJ type folks would do this. There's some other ones I can't think of offhanded, but DJ Khaled, I would have to say, was the first one to do it, and his first album came out in the spring of 2006. And really, this is not his breakout album, despite the fact that this was the first one of the first albums to do this sort of thing. It was not really his breakout album. I feel like DJ Khaled really kind of crested and broke onto the scene with his We the Best album from 2007 because of songs like I'm So Hood and We Taken Over and Brown Paper Bag. And those were definitely some of the ones that went on to get DJ Khaled a lot of type stuff. But the thing about this record is it's just very Florida oriented, and I like the kind of thematic approach towards this project just because it has a lot of like it has a lot of like Rick Ross, Cool and Dre, Trina, Florida-esque type rappers that were making a lot of noise between like 2006. I definitely think that this had a lot of flattery from Rick Ross's Hustlin' song from early 2006, and there are some pretty stylish productions that are pretty similar to that Runners produced song. And I just like the kind of overall kind of lazy, kind of mellow, kind of easy breezy summer kind of energy that was just crested throughout 2006 because of folks like Rick Ross and Beat Novocaine, and like I think Beat Novocaine was DJ Khaled, but just those type folks. Pitbull, Fat Joe, Lil Wayne lived in Miami around this time because of Hurricane Katrina. So there was just a lot of good moments that kind of went along with that. And even though this wasn't his breakout album, I still feel like it's pretty rock solid. I mean, there's definitely some good cuts on here, and I like the fact that this is probably the revolutionary one. This is a revolutionary project, and despite the fact that people may like the hooky kind of songs like We Taken Over and I'm So Hood better, I feel like this is kind of the one that made the waves and kind of paved the way for a lot of stuff that would go on to happen. So this is definitely an important and notable mid 2000s release, especially in the rap field, is because this is what started off DJ Khaled and that type of stuff. But I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the singles, because even though there weren't like even though these did not crest as hugely even though these did not crest as hugely as like his 2007 album, I still feel like these are pretty damn good. So I liked all of the three singles. The first single is Holla at Me, and Holla at Me has Lil Wayne, Paul Wall, Fat Joe, Rick Ross, and Pitbull on there. And this is just like a pretty ready to go kind of pounding club cut. I definitely would have to say I'm looking at another computer because I had to do the review on there. So it just has nice keys later on in the verse, but in each verse it kind of starts off with like this thumping kind of pounding type bassy kind of club type point, and then as the verse picks up it starts to have like these glittering kind of sparkling keys on there, and it works pretty well. I mean, this is basically DJ Khaled's debut single. This was also on Rick Ross's mixtape MIAO, but this is a good amalgamation of what to expect from DJ Khaled, and it's a great debut single as far as that kind of went. This is a great kind of lazy, I mean, the production is just very kind of relaxed and not lazy, but just more kind of chill than I would have expected, especially with all these rappers on here. It just works as far as it was. Lil Wayne was kind of more on his Carter 2 vibes, more so than his 2007 vibes, but still pretty good to kind of get that. Paul Wall, Fat Joe, and Rick Ross especially all fit the song real well, and so does Pitbull. It's interesting that Pitbull was on this song just because, yeah, I mean, Pitbull doesn't typically hop on DJ Khaled albums as much, but it's just interesting to kind of get him on there. But someone that I really feel like feels at home on these DJ Khaled projects is Rick Ross, just because these were the kind of joints that Rick Ross was pumping out in 2006. It's just interesting to kind of get these type vibes as far as like a pretty ready to go club cut that just, even though it's kind of mellow, I still feel like it's pretty charming just in the fact that it does kind of have like some this sparky kind of energy, just but the energy is just not turned all the way up. I feel like We Taken Over was just an astronomical kind of club cut that worked, but this one is just kind of like a bubbler. That's just the thing about this project. These are just a bunch of bubblers. But so the second single was Grammy Family, and this is another good pairing because he snagged Kanye West when he was on top of his game. He had just crested from his late registration albums. That's pretty good to get Kanye more on his late registration vibes. Grammy Family is just a nice one. I mean, this one, Grammy Family is not necessarily like a club or a dance club cut like Holla at Me, but it's definitely like a blue blood, sophisticated night venue type cut. You know, maybe like some more kind of organized and more tuxedo or suit kind of wearing for the night type stuff. I definitely feel like Kanye West and Consequence go in pretty well on here. And John Legend doesn't really do the hook on this song. He just kind of does like some kind of background vocals, kind of like mid, this kind of more ad-libbing more so than anything else. I do wish that John Legend would have done a hook on here. It probably would have worked pretty well, but yeah, it's kind of the early stages of getting these massive songs that DJ Khaled would do later. But this is definitely a nice one. It's definitely a very fancy song and works pretty damn well. And then Born and Raised was the third single. And this one really reminds me of Rick Ross's Hustlin'. This is just a perfect kind of similar. If you really are obsessed with the song Hustlin' by Rick Ross, this is another similar type vibe to that sort of assortment. And this has those same organs and kind of pretty similar feel, even down to the hook. It just works in that sort of sense. Trick Daddy and Pitbull do mesh well, but the best person who meshes the best on this song is Rick Ross. These type songs, DJ Khaled just really knew the type songs that Rick Ross would work on. But I do feel like Trick Daddy, because he's from Florida, works on here, and Pitbull's from Florida also, and he works on here. It's interesting to kind of get three Florida giants on this type song and see what they do with it. It's just kind of like Hustlin', just a posse cut of Hustlin', that type stuff. It definitely has it's actually a blurry kind of song on here. This is kind of a lot of the production on this Listen, the album is just very kind of lackadaisical, and you'll notice that it just doesn't have I mean, apart from Watch Out with Akon, Styles P, Fat Joe, and Rick Ross, I'd say for the most part these beats are just very kind of heat wave, kind of lazy summer evening kind of energy for the most part, and Born and Raised is definitely one of those. I mean, I like the production on Born and Raised, but it just doesn't explode off the page like as much as some of the I mean, Holla at Me is probably a little bit more of a lively kind of song, but I feel like apart from Holla at Me and Watch Out, there's just not a bunch of beats on here that are just really jump off the page, kind of shake some sense into you kind of stuff. But so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the album. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the rest of the albums. There's 16 songs on here, and I wound up liking 10 songs out of 16. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend those 10 songs to you, and we'll talk about this. So these 10 songs are Born and Raised, Holla at Me, MIA, Still Fly, Movement, Grammy Family, Watch Out, Candy Paint, Gangsta Shit, and Never Be Nothing Like Me. So to talk about some of these, like, apart from the three singles, I feel like Watch Out probably has the best beat on here apart from Holla at Me. This is definitely an outstanding one. Akon delivers a pretty rock solid hook, and it's good to get him paired up with Styles P from Locked Up kind of fame. So Akon and Styles P crank out another gem, and then Fat Joe and Rick Ross suit the song pretty well as well. So that's just kind of the concept about it. It's probably very similar to like a Lil Jon beat. Reminds me of Snap Your Fingers and like Usher's Yeah and those type ones. I'd be surprised if Lil Jon didn't produce this, but it's very similar to that. It's a nice vanilla club cut in a lot of ways. And Gangsta Shit's a really nice one with Jeezy, Bun B, and the rest of USDA, which is Slick Pulla and Blood Raw. So this one is kind of similar to Rick Ross's Hustlin'. Like if Jeezy and USDA would have been on a song that's similar to Hustlin' by Rick Ross, this is definitely one that would be. And then Bun B is on there also. And it just has like some kind of crunchy synth type stuff in there also, which is a nice touch. But it just really feels kind of relaxed overall. It's just kind of basically Jeezy and them just on something that Rick Ross should have been on, and that type stuff. It's just kind of got that Florida more vibe where Jeezy's not on his Atlanta type stuff, but just more on like a Florida type vibe. And Never Be Nothing Like Me with Lil Scrappy. This is another kind of rowdy kind of song by Lil Scrappy, but the energy behind it is just not quite as crazy as he normally is. It's just kind of in a more Florida sense. It's kind of more like kind of offhanded. It really feels like a strip club cut, which is interesting. Lil Scrappy and Homeboy both suit the song pretty well, but it's interesting to kind of get Lil Scrappy on a song that's not crunk, because he melds so well with crunk music, but DJ Khaled kind of put out a beat that kind of does it, but it's just kind of offhanded and just kind of more breezy and just kind of whimsical about it. That's really the thing about it. It's just not a typical song that you'd hear a little scrappy on, but it works. It's still something to kind of get a little bit crunk to, but it's not a class A kind of crunk song. And it's not class A because it's a bad song. It's just different from the sort of stuff that he's normally on. Candy Paint with Slim Thug, Chameleonaire, and Trina is a nice one. This is a really kind of mid-graze kind of song. This has a real kind of mid kind of energy about it. It's just a nice evening tune. It's really mellow and that type stuff, I just would have to say. It's very similar to the energy of Birdman's Still Fly. There's just some songs on here that are just very kind of lackadaisical. So mid-tempo, mid-graze kind of songs would be Gangsta Shit, Movement, Still Fly, and then Candy Paint. Those are definitely all ones that kind of have like this kind of sparkling water, kind of lackadaisical, more mellow kind of energy. But I did like it. It definitely felt like a nice evening tune. It's not quite a club cut, I would say, Candy Paint, but it's definitely one that just kind of in the evening, maybe smoking a stogie, something like that, those type things. And but I did like Still Fly. Birdman pulled off a really nice one here. If you've ever heard Big Timers is Stay Fly or Still, if you've ever heard Big Timers is Stay Fly song, which is Birdman and Manny Fresh doing a pretty hooky rap song that was a big hit out of the early 2000s. This is kind of similar to that vibe. It's kind of like a pseudo sequel to that. Like Birdman and Manny Fresh have kind of done spin-off songs of that song just because of how much success it had. But this is a nice one to kind of get more of that, and I definitely like that. They just really killed the hook on here, and it just was really outstanding. It's got like some pretty mid-graze, just kind of regular kind of summery energy about it. It's just kind of work a day, but I still liked it. MIA with Lil Wayne is a nice club cut. I like the Lil Wayne songs on here. He definitely should have been on here more. But I definitely would have to say that Lil Wayne just really destroyed this song, just tore it apart, and it's kind of a thumper. And like the second verse, it gets kind of tropical, but for the most part, this is a pretty thumping and bass heavy kind of song that just has a lot of pound to it, and I just like the concept of it. I like that Lil Wayne was kind of on these cuts. Definitely was a good gem that got him some noise. This is kind of more 2006 Lil Wayne when he was on his Dedication 2 type vibe, so it's the same kind of concept there, but it definitely works. It's just Lil Wayne on there. Movement was a nice one with Dre from Cool and Dre. I mean, it feels like there's another rapper on the third verse on this song, but I do like these Dre songs. It's interesting. It's really too bad that Dre from Cool and Dre never dropped an album in 2006, because between this song, Chevy Riding High, and a bunch of other ones, like him being on Rick Ross's album, stuff like that, it felt like Dre was trying to break even back then. I know he at least dropped some mixtapes or something like that, but I like the concept of getting these Dre songs because he's a gem from Florida, but I don't know who the other rapper, I don't know if that's the Cool dude from Cool and Dre on there, but it's just a nice one, just a really kind of mellow and kind of nice hazy evening tune and that type stuff, and just very relaxed and work a day, I would have to say. That should virtually take care of it. So for the most part, out of the songs I didn't enjoy, I just kind of feel like some of these just had some pretty bad beats, and for folks that were not from like the Dirty South and that type of stuff, like I was really kind of disappointed in like the Twista and Bone Thugs and Harmony beat. That was just, I like the fact that because they had a rivalry, they at least tried to patch things up, but it just did not showcase them well. I feel like Joel Santana got kind of fucked over just because he didn't have a nice beat and he was kind of on fire in 2006. And Freeway and Clips, I didn't really like the amalgamation of that one. I think that it should have been more Miami bass type stuff. I mean, DJ Khaled trying to be kind of for all genres and subgenres and stuff just didn't work as much, because some of these more East Coast ones and like the Beanie Siegel and Jadakiss song just didn't quite work as well. I mean, they needed to be. I feel like Jadakiss, Beanie Siegel needed to be on songs like Holla at Me or Watch Out or something like that, because Styles P was on a nice one. Like Styles P is from the East Coast, but he was on a nice song, and so was Fat Joe. Fat Joe and Styles P are both from New York and stuff, so they were on some nice ones. But some of these folks, I mean, every now and then there'll just be songs that just don't match really well for DJ Khaled, and it just kind of makes you wish that it would be more of like something that fits a better theme or something like that. And it's just kind of, I almost said that about Gangsta's Shit with Jeezy, Bun B, and the USDA crew, but I did wind up liking Jeezy and them kind of on something that sounds like it should be made for Rick Ross, but it's just like sometimes these differential pairings kind of work, but sometimes they don't. Like another one that didn't work that well was just kind of the Dip Slide Right Out song with T.I., Big Country King, and Young Dro, which I would have normally liked to pair in with all three of these guys because they work pretty well, but I really couldn't vibe with that kind of beat at all. I mean, some of these just didn't. Yeah, Dip Slide Right Out just didn't really have attractive enough production. I mean, T.I. normally sails through this. I mean, if this had been a different amalgamation, I would have definitely said that these three, the PSC members and then Young Dro, definitely should have had something. This should have not met T.I.'s quota, most assuredly. That just kind of happens to be a thing. But that's kind of the concept. So me liking 10 songs out of 16 on here, which is more than half the album, I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 7.75 out of 10 because I feel like that's decent enough. I could give it a 7.5, but I kind of feel like no, I'm gonna give this album a 7.75 out of 10 because that's rock solid enough. 10 out of 16, which is really just 6 songs I didn't wind up liking. Like I said, normally if I would have liked 13 or 14 songs, you know, if I would only dislike 2 or 3 songs, it'd probably get like a 9, 10, somewhere in that category. So I feel like that's just about solid enough just because a lot of these are pretty good. The energy is pretty good on here. It's kind of mellow and kind of more relaxed than I would have expected, but a lot of these are pretty much bubblers and nice kind of slow smoke, kind of evening smoke, just got off work kind of smoke sessions on here that just work, and a lot of kind of spring and summer kind of energy just for some warm days. So it just kind of works. So 7.75 out of 10. The social score I'll give an 8.5 out of 10 just because a lot of these are pretty outgoing. And I think over half the album has a lot of good joints for stepping out. And another good thing about it is you don't know what rapper you're going to get. So this kind of thing, you just have some different ones. You know, you'll have Trina on here, Chameleonaire, Lil Scrappy, Twista, Akon, Styles P, Fat Joe, Paul Wall, Jadakiss, Kanye West, Jeezy, Pitbull. I mean, all these differential folks that are on here. The budget was really kind of vibrostic and worked in a lot of ways. So it's just kind of it's one of the beautiful things about a DJ Khaled album is just being able to get that. And it's pretty social. There's just plenty of gems on here. So in terms of the future, like DJ Khaled, he's working on stuff. He talks about on Instagram how he's got some stuff in the pipeline. So we'll see what happens. But he did drop an album back in August of 2022 called God Did, which is his most recent project. So we'll see what happens. But this is definitely a gem. And it's kind of a forgotten about gem at that. So just kind of look into it. It's kind of difficult to find. It's not on streaming services, which is why I'm using 2 computers. But I would have to say it is one worth picking up still.